Good morning, friends. Have a great day. I'm happy to reconnect with you all. I would like to discuss about a concept which Google has introduced recently, which of course in my applications I have been building it with that similar architecture but without a proper terminology. So I realized it's so innovative and also it is something that since it is being published in the public domain by Google, I would also want to bring it to all your knowledge. As an entrepreneur, I wanted the businesses to be implemented, digitized very fast. And the second thing, as an IT expert and also a programmer, for being 2 decades of a programmer, I would want to build applications very fast. And also, I didn't want to build applications one by one with its own functionalities again and again, rebuilt again and again. So what I developed in my architecture framework is a purely decoupled front end and the back end. And in the back end, I have also built it in a way that each and every process is broken down into its sub process. If possible, the third level, fourth level sub processes. And all these sub processes are to be listed first of all in the requirement specification, the way I have the requirement specification document design. Now, each and every of these sub-processes have been broken in a way that each and every of these sub-process is now in random sequence being allocated to different developers. Now, imagine that it is a very decoupled, completely isolated environment where the abstract knowledge on what they are building for is the only thing that the developers will know about. So it's like an abstract knowledge that they don't have to know the whole application end to end, which makes it easy for me to also make it understandable, make it very clear for my developers that even if the developer is a fresh developer or a developer is an experienced developer, I wouldn't want them to be brought into a particular boardroom to explain start to end of that application. Instead, what I have been doing it is in a way that I spend a lot of time in requirement specification document and business re-engineering and then business process documentation. So now, going into the concept, what I would want to speak about is what is that technology what Google has brought in, which made me to think about it like what I have been doing is a great job and a great innovation, and I'm so happy that it has a universal standard terminology called ADK, that is Agent Development Toolkit. Now, if you look at the agent development kit, is not a simple terminology because we started our application development from a monolithic approach. From then we were speaking about 3-tier, 2-tier architecture. Then we brought in as backend, database and front end. Now when we look at it in a different way, we have always been developing all our applications modular. So when we now drill down that modular aspect into so far, more in detail, each and every modular aspect, if we now split it in the documentation point of view, what are the process, sub-process, and how these process can be reused, how they can be named, how can they be now commonly developed. It's not like they are being developed for that particular application. Now, which means when we speak about finance is a common application that is used by most of the applications. When we look at procurement is used by most of the applications. When we look at now an authentication process, it's a usual process. When we look at a multi-tenant architecture, it's an usual process. So when we look at a particular application and its required functionality that differs mostly is mainly at the core, not at that these functionalities which can be reused. So imagine the architecture. Just imagine, think about it. If the finance module is developed in a way where each and every process from the general ledger, from each and every ledger lines, from there now drilling down into account types, asset types, then accounts, for each and account, every account, you create a transaction code, and that transaction code, you now map it into a transaction type. That transaction type, you now take it off as if it is now invoked through an API, let's say an endpoint. An endpoint just triggers which transaction type has to be triggered for which transaction with just the transaction details given in that application. That means now we have made it granular. In short, we can speak about modular to granular. Now when it comes to the granular, keep it aside. Don't worry too much about agentic architecture. Agentic architecture, which you are seeing in the AI world today, is not so far. Those who are in 40s and 50s and who have been programmers for decades, 2 decades, and 3 decades, don't worry about it, because it is not something new for us all. It is what we have been developing from day one. It's just that the terminologies have differed a bit. So now when we look at what is this agentic, now take all your granular modules, subprocess, process, drill it down to the shortest, the smallest function that you can implement, and that becomes now a code, a function. Whether we use a Python, whether we use a Java, whether we use whatever it is, make the tech stack. Now, just forget about the tech stack. Think about it as a class or a method or whatever, as a function or a code, a snippet or whatever it is. A code snippet is what we call a tool. Now, when we come to ADK, ADK's process is you need to have the purpose, you need to have the tools, you need to have the controls, you need to have the framework. Simply, just that is all. I will explain the ADK in future, but I just wanted to give you a prerequisite or a brush up of what you have been doing all these years when you are in 40s and 50s, and what are you thinking about this agentic architecture. It is not too different. It is not too tough for any one of us to understand. It's so easy. Now that granular code, what you are speaking about, it is now the tool and the control. Now when it comes to ADK, in ADK, we are going to use what we call what we can speak about is the ADK enables us to orchestrate all these granular modules, subprocess, process, whatever it means. That's code snippet to be orchestrated. Now that orchestration is captured, and that orchestration, it allows the application through ADK to invoke each and every of these code snippet in an architecture, orchestrated flow, and then it now allows that to think about what has to be the output. So process by process by process is orchestrated, and each of these orchestration is captured through the ADK. Now the ADK invokes as and when that ADK is now called in for an API. That API, when we call it as a code snippet, we know how to convert a code snippet into an API. So a set of code snippets or a code snippet into an API. So now assume each of these APIs are orchestrated and then now passed on through ADK. Now ADK orchestrates it for each and every functionality what we need, and then it thinks through what we have coded. It won't think on its own. It is going to think on the granular way that application you have developed. And that code snippet is what is going to be used. So you have a full control of what ADK does. But ADK orchestrates and thinks through your brain what you have coded with. The next thing is, does it have to rethink? That is the control. And all these controls and these tools are developed in our application, whichever the tech stack it is. So simply this is ADK. So maybe my version of ADK is differing a lot from the Gen Z's ADK definition, because I am not a Gen Z, and I love Gen Z's way of approach and the way now all these technology based companies are coming up with platforms that allows the Gen Z's to now do vibe coding, a lot of automations and things. But now I don't want the 40s and 50s and 60s of these programmers, whoever is in 40s, 50s and 60s, not to be left out. I want them also to be inclusive in this AI world. So it is not a very tough thing. So please contact me in my email for you if you need further clarifications. We can still discuss further on it on my social media posts and things. Thanks a lot for all your patience, and thanks for listening. We will still be diving deep into most of these concepts. MCP is the Model Context Protocol. Then there is UCP, which is now a Universal Commerce Protocol, UCP. And then when we look at ADK, now we have a lot of things which is not so different from what we have been doing, and it's a happy vibe code era where we are in, where we don't have to spend a lot of time in coding thousands and thousands of lines of codes. So let's dive deep slowly in our further discussions. Thanks a lot, friends. Thank you.